Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. This is episode 2023.9. As usual, I'm joined with Phil. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Rohan. How's it going?
Good. This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabukasa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant and ESP Home projects. Configurations done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certs, or any YAML. All right, Phil. What's new? How's it going?
2023.9. So September is a big month in Home Assistant land, and this September is a huge month. So we've got Home Assistant turning 10 years old, which is awesome. And we've also got Nabukasa celebrating their 5-year birthday mark too. So, amazing achievement. Like, to think, like, 10 years ago, right? Like, Paul was just, fiddling around with some Python scripts to get some Philips Hue bulbs to turn on and off when he wanted to. And here we are now, right? There's so many employees at Nabukasa. We've got a whole community. That's
awesome.
It's really cool.
That's it's the project itself has evolved so much since then too, right? It's starting out as this, like, even the UI has evolved, like so many elements of it have evolved, right? So it's just really cool.
So there's going to be some. I think there's a release party for 2023.9. I'm not sure if there's going to be a separate birthday event, which I'm pretty sure there is. There's going to be like a birthday celebration event, live stream happening. So watch out for announcements around that. There should be some, hopefully some cool birthday presents I'm hoping for.
That's wicked.
But otherwise, it's 2023.9, so a whole new release, right?
Yeah.
So the biggest feature the biggest change in this release, which is something I don't think, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already using Home Assistant, so you're not going to really see, if that makes sense. And that's the new onboarding flow. So that is when you set up Home Assistant for the first time. It's one of the first things off the product development lifecycle that Nabucasa's got, with a whole new product team and product manager and all that. So there's a whole new design. They've cut out a whole bunch of questions. So for example, if you put in your location as Canada or Australia, it will know, it won't ask you what currency, right? It's going to know you need Canadian dollars or Australian dollars, right? Standard stuff. Same with things like measurement units. It's going to be smart enough to work out who's using metric, who's using imperial. So it can just cut those out, and the flow looks like much nicer, right? Like it doesn't feel like you're setting up a development environment when you would do with Home Assistant, right? You have to go into YAML and copy these things around, or any of that crap, right? Like it looks like an actual app that you would buy from a system, buy from a vendor, and you could give it to your mum and dad and allow them to go through a setup wizard and set it up.
That is very cool.
So, I think, and this is, going to make getting into Home Assistant so much easier.
Yeah. Something we always talk about, right? Like, how do we bring more people onto the system, kind of thing? Yeah.
It reminds me a bit, like, when I've had one of my Z-Wave boxes was a Vera, like, and it had like a similar, like, it had a UI, right? And I thought, it was clunky, but it was still, like, it made sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, they'd spent a bit of time. Yes, it didn't look that great. It looks dated. But you could still kind of muddle your way around it. Like, I could say, all right, it's not as technically advanced as I'm looking for, but it's still simple enough for the average Joe to use. And I think the team have done a great job in this new flow, to the effect that, you go through the setup flow, and then one of the, as it's going through, it'll discover devices on your network, as Home Assistant can do, and go, okay, cool. Now you set up Home Assistant. Hey, while you're here, do you want to configure the ESP Home device that we've discovered on your network, the Apple HomeKit, device that we've discovered? Hey, we can see there's a Z-Wave JS server over here. Let's link that up too. Just do it all at that one point, right? And then people are in, they're set up, and away they can go.
That is super nice. I don't know. Like, it's. I think it's those little things that make the difference, right? Like, it's small incremental pieces that kind of make the platform overall better. Even though this isn't one that I won't see, you won't see, Phil, like you said. Like, I just think it just makes the whole thing a little bit nicer. All right. Tile card. So there's a couple of new features to tile cards. So for example, changing modes for climate devices and such. So let's start with the first one. So light cards now can set the color temperature. Covers can now set positions, tilt angles. So it's exactly like the existing mushroom card. So which is actually very nice. If we remember a while ago, they changed a couple of these cards as well to be more like, I don't want to call it home style esque, home kit esque,
Yeah.
right? But it is kind of similar to like that. Like you get that giant blob of like for a cover, for example. It's like you have slider up. Do you want up, down? How do you want it? And where do you want it? So I guess it's now nice that you can actually go in and say, okay, I want to set it to like 43% or something specific like that.
I do like as part of the update too, they the climate more info dialogue got a whole new rework as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that like I just like it. It makes it so much easier, right? I've been using the beta, and just to be able to, it was a pain in the bum to try and work out what mode to set like a thermostat on, like is it auto cool or it was a drop down that just looked ugly. Now it's a little button down the bottom, set it to heat. If you've got auto, you've got the two dials, and it makes it looks really slick.
Yeah, that is pretty nice. Yeah, but it's a lot of cool work going into that. So.
But I think if 2023.9 has anything going for it, I think it is this feature. And that is there is a whole new platform called lawnmowers. So, you've got your light domain, you've got your switch domain, you've got your vacuum domain. Now there is a lawnmower domain. So now if there are smart lawnmowers in the world, which there are, of course, they can now integrate with Home Assistant, and there's now a new lawnmower platform available for them. So I think there's a few releasing in 2023.9, or there's a way you can get some brands in via a third-party library to then talk over MQTT into Home Assistant. But yeah, I'm really excited to see lawnmowers. One, because smart lawnmowers at least, are typically seen as expensive. So the fact that now the open source community is getting behind, bringing these in to the local home environment, into the local home, means that hopefully they can get some maybe cheaper ones to work in Home Assistant, which makes them more appealing than having to go to a whole $6,000-$7,000 lawnmower, right?
Yeah. No, that is very nice. Now I need a smart lawnmower. Never ends. All right, so helpers. You can now set up a template sensor from the UI. So if you remember, traditionally that's been something that's always been done in YAML because it was always considered something advanced, right? So, and then setting things like unit of measurement, device class, so on and so forth as well. So that's nice there. There's also a live preview on the UI. So Phil, what does that mean? Like, I know you were on the creators call there. So
yeah. So now, like when you're creating a template, you can use the templating debug tools in the developer section to render a template to make sure you haven't got any errors in your template. They've also now, as you're creating the new helper template, at the bottom of the dialog where you're entering your Ginger code to create the template sensor, they'll actually render what the value will look like, or what the card will look like in a dashboard based on what options you're setting. So if you've typed out or you've copied and pasted your template and you've got the sensor values reading, let's say you're putting as a temperature sensor, you choose the temperature units, it will now display a live view of, okay, this sensor would actually render 20 degrees Celsius on the UI.
Right on the bottom there, it'll kind of show you what it looks like. That's nice. Yeah. That's nice.
And that's also helpful for things, like when you're using a binary sensor. Let's say you want to change what type of binary sensor it is. Do you want to use just on-off, or would you like to then, maybe it's a smoke sensor, so you want to go, is it safe, not safe, or open, closed? So, yeah, you can actually see how those how your template reacts to the value. Because sometimes it gets confusing, right? Is a door that's in the state of on, does that mean it's open or does it mean it's closed, right?
Right.
Now you can use that live template view to see that you've got the values around the right way.
That makes sense. I mean, that is actually pretty neat. That's very handy having a live preview in there. So, also groups can be set up from the UI now. And if you set devices up that have numbers in it, you can kind of say, okay, do I want to have the average or mean values in there, right? Which is pretty nice, rather than just having like a
group, like entities, like a group sensor. So you could previously set up groups from the UI, like add multiple devices to a group, but now you can also do a group entity, which takes its values from multiple entities.
Correct. Sorry. Yeah. So like, again, thing like median temperature. So like, what does that look like through the entire house or whatever that is, right? Like, so that's nice there. Yeah.
All right. And if you're sorting by controversial, this is the one that comes up the top of the list, I think. The weather get forecast service is a new feature in Home Assistant. So now against the weather domain, there is a get forecast service that you can call against a weather entity. And that will then return you. And when you're doing a service call to that entity, you can specify, do you want it for the daily forecast or the hourly forecast? And it will spit back the appropriate forecast that you've requested. So now you can do things, for example, when you're using the assist, you can ask it, what's the forecast? It will then do a live request to your weather service and get the forecast. So same thing, in your automations, do a service call and then return that data using those return values. The controversy, of course, now becomes as part of the breaking changes. The forecast attribute against a weather entity has now been deprecated. Now it's not going to be removed for 6 months, but I think this one, I think a lot of people using automations, for example, what's the forecast for tomorrow? And everyone looks at that using their weather entity and looking at the array that is the forecast attribute. That is going away as of March 2024. So I think there's going to be a lot of integrations, essentially every weather integration. It doesn't matter if it's Home Assistant or a custom one from Hacks. I know I've got a local Australian weather Bureau of Meteorology that's from Hacks that needs to be updated now. I'm getting a warning about that. So I'll have to update any automations that reference like the weather for tomorrow, right? I have I've got my weather script that says, it reminds me, okay, it's going to be sunny tomorrow with this temperature. Do you want to schedule some washing so you can get the washing out early, right? That all those sort of types of automations are going to have to change now.
Yeah, a lot of people have automations for weather based on like, hey, go water the grass, like turn on the sprinklers or not, or something like that, right? Like it's so there's stuff to consider there. If you do have any automations based on the weather, you may want to rethink or rebuild those potentially.
Yeah.
But like I said, Phil, I guess you do have a bit of time. You don't have, it's not like front and center right now unless and that notification will eventually bother you and make you do it. So
the notifications against like integrations that use that attribute, it won't actually alert you like if there is an automation in your system
automation
or a template.
Is doing it's correct.
It's still doing it. So there could be something hiding in your YAML or somewhere that you haven't noticed yet.
Yeah. And just to get the vibe up a little bit more, local Bluetooth gets faster again, so that's nice. It's been, I think it was showed love a couple of episodes ago, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was the last episode. So there was a bit of stuff where there's improvements in the local Bluetooth ability there, and it's just getting better and better. Love that.
All right. In terms of new integrations, O-Power integration gets New York City Power support. So if you're in New York City, there you go. You've got now the ability to see what your electricity usage is. That's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Schlage, Wi-Fi smart locks. I was actually talking about this one to somebody earlier last week. So it's, again, obviously the Z-Wave locks and such are built in through Z-Wave. So it's not going to affect you there. But the Wi-Fi smart locks, it is nice to see that there because I think in the past that was like very like people have been trying to get it in, and it's always been a hack and things like that. So it's nice to see that there's some official support there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
The Swedish traffic camera feeds are now also available in Home Assistant, so you can get a live view of traffic if you're in Sweden. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the actual name of the government department that does that. Like, that's not going to work. So there you go.
Yeah, if it affects you, look it up. Well, you'll figure it if it's the right one or not. Vodafone Station. So it provides device tracker support for Vodafone Station routers. So that's nice there.
And Yardian has now support for the Yarden Smart Sprinkler Controller. So there you go.
Nice. All right, let's quickly run through a couple of breaking changes. So the HTTP mode, or the HTTP web server piece here. So Home Assistant can't be put into an iframe anymore by default. If you still want to embed Home Assistant in or that UI in a frame, you can do so by by disabling the use X-frame options by setting it to false in the HTTP config. Again, this probably affects a smaller subset of people, but if you do have that, then something to consider there.
So just on a point of clarification there, so Home Assistant can still render other services. So if you've got local network
Correct.
items as a panel card in Home Assistant, that can be used. This is actually then having Home Assistant as, for example, another panel in Home Assistant or another website. I'm guessing this is a good security measure as Home Assistant instances are exposed to the wider world thanks to things like the Nabukasa. If you've opened up a hole in your router and doing port forwarding to your instance, just makes things a little bit more secure by default.
Yeah, so if you want to turn it on, you can still do it. It's just with intention rather than something else, right, where you may not want it there.
Absolutely. All right, we mentioned the weather forecast service that deprecates the forecast attribute. So the next one on our list we have is MQTT device trackers will no longer always update when there is no state change. This means that automations that trigger on a state change no longer are triggered if there's no change at all. So previously, if you had an MQTT device tracker and for whatever reason there was another the same state was pushed to the MQTT topic, it would render an update in Home Assistant. Now Home Assistant's going to say, okay, hang on, this device tracker is already marked as home and I've just got another update via MQTT to mark it as home. I'm not going to send an updated event and trigger automations for that item. So it could be if you've got automations relying on that state being updated, you may have to consider moving maybe to like a time pattern or something like that and evaluating that way.
Yeah, I think I do. Oh, that's only for device trackers, so that shouldn't be a huge issue. Yeah. On-phase Envoy. So Envoy versions that are less than 3.9, so that's before the API, are not supported anymore because they require web scraping, which is they've moved away from web scraping a while ago now. So, so basically, I don't know how that works, but basically just try and upgrade, I guess, if you can. And you can retain that.
Zigbee.js, so the entity naming logic has been updated to be less brittle, as they explained it. Therefore, Zigbee.js entities that you haven't given a custom name to may be renamed during an update in Zigbee.js. They are registered in the device registry, so entity IDs and will not change. It's just the actual name of the device may change. So yeah, as long as the entity ID is remaining the same, you should be okay with automations not being affected. It's just going to be a random name in your dashboard that you may have to go and fix.
All right. I think that's mostly it, I think.
Yeah. So we should do some housekeeping, Rohan, while we're here. So we had a couple of people reach out on the Discord room. So you might be hearing ads in our podcast feed. So I think what we are, I don't know, I can't remember how many birthdays we're up to now, but I think it's 6 or 7, something like that, maybe more.
Yeah.
But my host has given me several warnings that, this is your last time we're resetting this, right? Like, you need to fix your traffic on your blog, on the podcast side at least.
Yeah.
So one of our listeners reached out to us and said, "Hey, I do this for a living. Let me help you guys. I've got an idea for you." So we've moved hosts to a professional podcast host now, which we're paying for. We can get better analytics. As part of that, we are also serving ads to some listeners of the podcast to raise some revenue for our time and how we run the podcast. Pay for the software, pay for the equipment that we use. I think looking at our stats so far, the ads have only been on for a couple of weeks. It's 35% of people listening to the podcast are actually receiving ads. So majority of people probably won't hear an ad in their feed, but for those that are, it can be a bit jarring. When I just want to be clear here, we are not trying to get rich off this. This is purely just a way to pay for podcasting, pay for the apps we use to record and edit and all that. And I'd also, ideally we'd love to then be able to do some nice things to the podcast as well. My big hit list is I'd love to get all our episodes captioned. We can't use any of that. There's a lot of free captioning agents that you can use, just like thanks to ChatGPT, like audio to text and all that. Yeah. Unfortunately for us, when we're saying things like Zigbee, ESP Home, Z-Wave, those auto transcription services just fail hard, right? And then you add in, we've got guests, you've got 3 different accents. US English is fine. Canadian's fine, but Australian and anything else, it's sort of, is that even English that we're reading back after that?
Yeah.
So we do need some humans to transcribe. And of course, there's just, I'd like to get more episodes out.
And we have tried it just for reference. It does not work well.
It does not work out well. We're still experimenting with the ads. So at the moment, if we decide they're not working, we may move into a different spot, cut them completely. We did have some people reach out and say, "Hey, is there an ad-free version?" We have a Patreon page. If you haven't noticed, there are links in the show notes and on our website. You're welcome. We will, if people want to sign up for Patreon to get an ad-free feed, we will absolutely publish all the episodes ad-free, of course. Nobucasa subscription, Nobucasa sponsorship. That's up to Nobucasa if they're still going to sponsor us. We hope they do, but as I said, this isn't a way for us to get rich by any means. It's how can we make the podcast better and pay for some of the things? Also, if you do want to help out in another way, we would love any editing support, any social media stuff, anything like that. So if you're keen to help out that way, please hit us up. Feedback at haspodcast.io. Otherwise, it just becomes a function of time and money, and we would love to be able to outsource a lot of the back end stuff that we do at the podcast to generate more content, and of course, make it better for everyone. Right? Like I think a lot of people have asked about transcriptions for the podcast. I would love it. I'd love to be able to search our previous episodes and see what we talked about 10 years ago. Right? Well, not 10 years ago, but 5 years ago. I'd love to get more episodes out too.
Yeah, and I mean, even there's a YouTube option as well, right? So, which again, feel free to subscribe, support us that way. I mean, we're not inserting ads on the YouTube side at this point, unless YouTube themselves inserts the ads and so on, right? Which we don't get. We're not monetized on YouTube right at this point, at least. So it's not like we're doing that on that front, but might be an option there too.
All right. Now to something that we got a lot of feedback from the last episode. I talked about my Zigbee network devices, like all my battery devices going offline, which was driving me insane. So we had a whole bunch of people reach out to me. So thank you everyone that did either comment on YouTube, sent me an email, ping me on Discord. I really appreciate it. So Nick reached out and said, I'm completely the opposite to your experience. I have never had a single issue with Zigbee. and he mentions that he has a Sonoff Universal Zigbee USB radio. He's running Zigbee to MQTT, and he has 47 Zigbee devices, and I think I had 60-something last time I checked. And he had a coverage around 210 square meters over 2 floors, which was pretty reasonable. So the biggest aha moment he had was when he stabilized his Zigbee network by fixing the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi spectrum allocation. Now, this is something that I have, that I'm fortunate enough that I'm in a detached house. I don't have much 2.4 gigahertz traffic around me, but it's something I was aware of. So for those that aren't aware, I thought this might be a good PSA just as a reminder. If you're having issues with your Zigbee network, there are some software that you can download, depending on Windows, Mac, whatever you're using, that can scan your local Wi-Fi coverage. Rohan, you work in networking, so you probably know more about me than this. But yeah, there's conflicts with Zigbee and the 2.4 gigs Wi-Fi spectrum. So you've got to choose your right Zigbee channel to avoid anything around there.
Yeah, I mean, really, they use the same channel space, right? So it's based on that. You might be overlapping a little bit, which isn't necessarily the worst, but it could cause issues if you are, right? So, and usually it's easier to change your Wi-Fi channels than the Zigbee channels, but it is possible to change your Zigbee channels as well. So, which might be a better option potentially, depending on how your Wi-Fi is doing,
or if it's neighbor's Wi-Fi that you can't change.
Yeah. There's always that.
Yeah. So Charlie, she reached out to me with an email, and it said, it's not the number of devices you have, it's actually your Combi 2 stick. And I thought, oh, okay, interesting. So replace it with a Sonoff. I had exactly the same thing happen to me. Daily drop-offs, unavailable devices. I had to repair everything. I replaced the Combi for a Sonoff, and all the issues disappeared instantly. So I can report that I successfully migrated my Combi Zigbee network to a Sky Connect from Nabukasa. So Nabukasa sent out to Rohan and myself free Sky Connects a few months ago. I had it sitting in the drawer waiting for a free weekend to migrate over and test it out. This prompted me to then, all right, you know what, I should give this a try. I will say I almost lost my Zigbee network in the migration. Wasn't
tell us
smooth
about
sailing. Okay, so I follow. So Sky Connect has a skykonnect.nabukasa page. So I went onto that and said, "How do you want to set up your network? Are you migrating from another stick? Follow this." So I followed the migration instructions, and it got to a point. So I first took a backup. I went through the Home Assistant UI. It prompted me to take a backup of the network. I did that. And then it prompted me, said, okay, cool, insert your new radio. Now I'm not running Home Assistant OS. I'm running a Docker container in my environment. So I had 2 USB paths. I had these 2 USB sticks plugged in at the same time. So the Combi and the Sky Connect. I had the paths mapped into the Docker container. So I said, yep, I'll insert my USB radio. Now, in the instructions on the Nabukasa Sky Connect page, the screenshots have it that the Sky Connect is automatically detected. Use this radio, away you go. That didn't happen for me. I was presented with what stick are you migrating to, and Sky Connect wasn't in the list. It was, like you're migrating to a Sonoff, you're migrating to a Bubs, one of those Z-Wave Zigbee combo sticks. I can't remember the name.
Whatever.
Yeah, I migrating to a Combi. What are you migrating to? Yeah. So I didn't know what to choose. So I cancelled out of that. Did some Googling around, and then eventually, now what happens that once I downloaded the backup, then what happens is Home Assistant does a soft reset on the Combi stick.
Okay.
So now at this point, I've cancelled out not thinking, okay, the Sky Connect wasn't detected. I'll just go back and start again, right? No problem. I can't do that now because Home Assistant has already done a soft reset on the Combi stick.
Oh.
And now my Zigbee network is down. I then go to do another migration. It takes it back up again. But this time it's doing a backup of a reset disk, of a reset Combi stick, right?
Right.
hoping that the Sky Connect will just get detected. So then I'm like, cool. So in my wisdom, I thought, I know what I'll do. I'm just going to restore my Home Assistant from the daily backups that I do. So I spun up, I repointed my Docker container to a backup image from 24 hours beforehand. What I had read online was that the Zigbee radio doesn't host any information. It's all based on your Zigbee database file that's in your config directory. Wasn't so. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for me. I still had everything unavailable. So something had changed on that Zigbee radio. So then I'm like stressing, oh, wow, like what do I do now, right? So there is a restore button that you can use to migrate from a backup. Unfortunately, from what I could see, the backup JSON file that was taken automatically by Home Assistant is different to the JSON file that you can actually manually request from Home Assistant. So if you go into ZHA settings, there's an export JSON backup. That gives you like a ZHA backup.json file that you save. That's different to what the automatic backup system that the migration uses for whatever reason, from what I could ascertain.
Interesting. Okay.
So now I'm like, okay, cool. I can't use that backup to restore this disk. What do I do, right? Luckily, somehow, for some odd reason, I had taken a ZHA backup in my downloads folder 2 months ago. I don't know for what reason.
Oh,
I was able. So any device that I hadn't paired in 2 months, which would have been one or two, fine. Anyway, I restored that to the combi first to get my Zigbee network back up. And interestingly, all those devices that were offline, like I had a couple of Windows sensors that had gone unavailable, that prompted me to test it out, came back online immediately without repairing. So I immediately knew, okay, this is actually not a Zigbee network issue. There's something going on with
that file.
The combi stick, right? Like, Yeah. So anyway, I then plugged in the Sky Connect. Once again, couldn't get the detection to say, we've detected Sky Connect on your system. You also can't run two instances of ZHA at the same time, whereas you could get, so which is frustrating. So I eventually had to rename what the path was, and I actually found in a random Google forum what it asks for, what IDs to use or something in the USB. I found in a random community post, use this ID number as the throttle limit or something like that. Use this as your serial path, which I matched to my Docker.
Yeah.
Prayed for the best, got it to then connect to the Sky Connect, and then I re-imported that backup from a couple of months ago, and it just worked. And I didn't have to repair all 64 devices. So wasn't easy, but with a bit of Googling, thanks to people in the community, posting on the forums, I was able to get my Zigbee network successfully migrated over to the Sky Connect. And I can say I'm 3 weeks in now on the Sky Connect. I have not had a battery device go offline since then. And I also have some blinds, some Zemismart blinds around the place that are Zigbee based.
Yeah.
And they would report their status to Home Assistant, but I wouldn't be able to control them for whatever reason. So I ended up buying a Broadlink Pro to control them via RF. They have now stuck. Like I have full control over all those blinds as well via Zigbee. So an immense improvement over the combi stick for whatever reason. Not bagging the combi stick. It was served me well for many years. But for whatever reason now, moving to the Sky Connect has greatly improved my Zigbee experience. So thank you, Charlie, for reaching out. I really am very grateful for that.
That's awesome. It's interesting. Along that same line, I was talking to somebody last week. As you know, Phil, I was at a sales conference for work or whatever, and one of somebody I was talking to was talking about their the fact that they moved from ZHA to Zigbee to MQTT, and that actually apparently changed their experience a ton. Right. So they were like, this is pretty big in the sense that they had similar kind of issues, devices not showing up, devices dropping off, that kind of thing, or devices just generally being unavailable. And moving to Zigbee to MQTT made a bit of a difference there too. So I wonder if it's that combination of ConB plus ZHA, etc.
Yeah,
was giving that issue. I wonder too if there is an update in like to the actual USB stick.
Potentially, yeah.
That would cover that. But last I checked, that update is a pain to.
Yeah, I would have had to like
do.
rerun. I think it's called Photon or Foscon, whatever they call the native app. And
if I'm not mistaken, that's only available on Windows too, which I don't have any Windows machines.
No, there's a Docker container. There's a Docker container you can run.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I'm thinking of another stick that I updated, which had only a Windows. You know what? It was my Z-Wave stick that was on there. So yeah, sorry. Yes, you are right. There is a Docker container for.
But interestingly, to update
the Foscon container, to
update the firmware, they do have like Windows and Mac OS update binary files. So maybe you can't do it through the Docker container.
Honestly, if it is, it's a lot easier for me to unplug it, plug it into my laptop, and just push it. Right, like it's.
So
that's.
At least now, like, and I had read a lot of reports of people, saying, "Oh, Sky Connect, I'm having issues with this Sky Connect." I haven't had any issues. I've got the little thing plugged in, like the little extension cable that Nabukasa have in the box. I've plugged that in, and it's been great. I am running the default firmware, so the one without Matter enabled, which apparently, if you do enable Matter, has some issues. I just want Zigbee to work for now. Like, I'm happy. I don't want to touch it anymore. Like, just keep those battery devices connected.
Yeah, you have to remember as well, for these kind of radios to be detected, it has to be USB 2, not USB 3, right? That tends to trip up a lot of people because you think latest device, you want to do 3.
Yeah.
That's actually not the case. It's actually better on 2, or more supported on USB 2. So something to keep in mind. So if you have an option of USB 2 or USB 3 ports, go for the USB 2 for your radios.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's why if you try it, sometimes you try it on one port, doesn't work. You try it on another, works great. So
there you go. So yeah, Charlie and Nick, thank you so much for reaching out, and everyone else. The problem is it's a mixed bag out there. Like, some people saying, "Oh, I'm using a Combi, I've had no issues. I've got 40 odd devices." Other people are like, "Oh, yeah." So thank you, Charlie and Nick. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And to everybody else that sent us emails.
That's it.
Something cool I just found. I think it was on Facebook. Phil, I sent it to you earlier.
Yeah, it was on Facebook.
Yeah. And it was the bubble card, which is just, we'll leave a link to the GitHub page, but it just looks like a really nice card collection there. So it's a nice, like, little pop-up touch kind of thing.
Yeah, it looks like it does like pop-ups. Like it reminds, like, it's beautifully designed. It reminds me a bit of like, it's not mushroom cards, but it's sort of like, it's got a nice look to it. And I think I'm going to try it out on a few things because it certainly looks slick, right?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it looks like it's pretty neat based on, especially for like mobile UIs and stuff like that. It looks pretty slick. So same, Phil. I think I eventually want to give it a shot, and probably not the next few weeks, but I do want to try it and play with it anyways. So
yeah, it's available in Hacks as well. So yeah, take a look at the GitHub page. I always love, like, when people share like things like this, especially UI, because I'm not a designer at all, right? I can certainly I can make other people's good stuff look nice for me. So I do really appreciate, people taking the time to share things like bubble cards, mushroom cards, and just extending Home Assistant that way. So yeah, thank you for putting it on Facebook, and Rohan too for sharing it, because I really liked it.
Yeah, I just thought it was super slick. So perfect. All right, now that is 2023.9 and all of our updates. There we go. Thanks for listening.
Cheers.
See ya. Cheers.